I'm ready.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It is now 6 o'clock. This is a meeting of the Finance Subcommittee, 9/28/2021. The purpose of the meeting are twofold. One is to get an update regarding bills from prior year from schools, and the second is an update regarding the city auditor search. Both items have been referred to the City Council and have been discussed in the past. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chairman Elliott.
Here.
Counsel Conway.
Here.
Counsel Noon.
Here.
3 present.
3 present, thank you. Why don't we take the first item on the agenda? Thank you, Mr. Baldwin and Ms. Chambers. Let me also recognize City Councilor Rita Mercia has joined the Finance Subcommittee. And with that, the purpose of this is to get an update regarding bills from prior year. We've had meetings in the past with joint subcommittees. This information is pretty straightforward. The schools continue to work to address bills from prior years, but these are a little bit different. And I'm going to let Connor Baldwin and Allison Chambers take the show, address the issue. But in large part, let me just sort of frame the issue for the people at home. This is regarding the special education. Funding is coming from the Special Education Stabilization Fund, and there are some circumstances that are beyond the control of the school committee, and as it relates to this particular issue with students moving in and out of the district, et cetera. So with that, if there's no objection from members of the subcommittee, Councilor No, Councilor Conway, any questions, thoughts? No? Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know our time here is short, so I'll be brief. The first item on the agenda related to the school department bills. As the chairman mentioned, these are a little bit different than what we've talked about in the past, in that they're related to special education services, and there are some nuances about special education students and the services related to either transportation or out-of-district tuition that do make it sometimes difficult to adhere to some of the rules and regulations for Massachusetts finance. So those bills that are in question have been presented to the school committee and discussed at a July 21st meeting of the school committee finance subcommittee. And these bills can be split up into 2 different categories. The first are outstanding bills related to special education services, either for tuition or for student support, translation, etc. The school department, Ms. Chambers, myself have been in communication with Ms. Turner, the business manager from the school department, who has explained some of the particular circumstances regarding these invoices and how there are certain circumstances where students come in and out of the district. Sometimes they don't know right away until after. Sometimes there's issues with the Department of Children and Families where there's placements, and the information comes down to the central district at a later date. The second component of these obligations relates to bills for homeless students, which I cannot purport to be an expert in the matter. However, it appears to be a more complicated issue where transportation for homeless students, sometimes there are disputes about which community is obligated to pay for transportation or for the student, depending on the particular circumstance with the family. So these obligations total approximately $140,000, and procedurally, under the law, it requires a city council vote in order to pay them because the dates of the invoices are from a prior fiscal year. Again, these are somewhat unlike what we've seen and discussed in the past, and I just wanted to note that for the committee. So to talk a little bit more about this issue and the funding sources, I just want to be clear that the school committee, the school administration is not seeking funding from the city budget. To cover these invoices, they only need approval under the law in order to allow the auditor to make payment. There are a number of different financing sources that the school can use to pay these, one being the FY22 school department operating budget, the second being the circuit breaker fund, which is a a special revenue fund that is funded by the state in order to give money to districts for certain unforeseeable costs related to special education services. And then the third is a special fund set up by the city a number of years ago. In June of 2017, the city council and the school committee voted to adopt Chapter 40, Section 13E, to establish a special education stabilization fund. So this is available to address unbudgeted special education costs in excess of the circuit breaker. And currently, at the end of FY 2021, that account had almost $1.4 million balance. So between these funding sources, the schools have sufficient funding to meet these obligations and have represented as much to the city manager's office. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to discuss them.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin, could you just give an example or some examples of sort of the circumstances that may present bad bills? Not in reference to the transportation, but just for students moving in and out of the district. How many are we looking at? Would you know that information?
I don't know offhand and would be happy to provide a more detailed report. Procedurally speaking, this matters before the subcommittee to be heard and considered, but we will separately need to bring a vote to the city council, and at that time, we'd be happy to include any information that the subcommittee is.
And we naturally have the obligation, and we should, to pay for their services. How about when they go out of district for these, I guess the same situation, they go out of district and to some of these private providers according to their IEP, and we have to pay for those services. Sometimes is it, I don't want to say negligence, but a delay on part of these private providers that they're sending bills in?
Sometimes.
Okay.
That does happen, and there is an administrative component to this that certainly adds to the complexity, where these private organizations have to present bills to the district. The district needs to perform their diligence to make sure that these bills are in order, that the children are, the responsibility is on the Lowell Public School District. So all of these diligence efforts take time, and sometimes either by virtue of the administrative process on the part of the private organization, there are certain delays that could cause these bills to come in either after the fiscal deadline, or that there is some, I don't want to say dispute, I'm just making up a hypothetical here, but there is some discussion about either the service, the validity of the types of services that need to be discussed. And so those matters sometimes take time and cross over the fiscal year, is my understanding.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. About 140,000. Let me go to members of the subcommittee. Council Conway.
Yeah, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Baldwin, for that report, because you are right on target. And I will say, when you talk about a student leaving the district and then perhaps, following the money. What does happen occasionally is that student will leave the district, come back, stay for a while, but because of family circumstances, they go back out to another. It sometimes happens more than once in the course of the year, which really complicates things. And again, the costs can be incredible. A number of years ago, and I think the mayor will remember this, that one student actually cost, it came into a little more than $320,000, one student. So again, the funding becomes extremely complicated, and you're right on target with it, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, point well taken. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Connor, could you speak to a bill related to homeless student service?
I can briefly, again, this is a matter that is not typically within our jurisdiction on the city side. However, in some discussion with Ms. Turner and our colleagues on the school side, it is my understanding that something similar happens as it relates to homeless students, where sometimes it is difficult to come to a decision as to who has fiscal responsibility for the student, which district, is the obligated party financially. As it relates to transportation and tuition, there is a further issue where there may be a homeless student who has an IEP and needs, maybe as a special education student, but does not have a permanent address. And so these types of matters transpire, I don't think with as much frequency as the other. However, they do, and these are some of the bills that came up that are being presented for approval because of the complexity of the issue and the amount of work that needs to go into figuring out, who is responsible for what, that there are time delays associated with that.
The transportation for this homeless student, is it provided usually by private or individual?
It is my understanding, yes.
How can one validate that?
I can't speak to that, Counselor. I think we would probably need to get a report from the schools.
Right. Well, thank you, anyway.
Sure, I can actually speak to that. The school department actually contracts with various transportation services. Council Mercer probably knows, Council Conway. And it's extraordinarily expensive. The cases are, they're very sad. They're hardship cases, but in some instances, students are traveling from 35, 40, they're traveling an hour, 2 hours a day in some cases. And the cost is very expensive. Sometimes there's no alternative when it's a taxi service and they're coming from a remote area. So, but that's a contract service that is validated through the school department. So I hope that helps a little bit, because I think it makes sense. Someone's just not calling Uber and saying, pick me up and deliver me here. They're structured contracts. I had another question, but now it slipped my mind. But I think this is, we're fine. I think we should, moving forward, there's a good explanation. We bring the report forward as a report of progress. What is the wish of the subcommittee relative to recommendation from this subcommittee on the bad bills? I'd entertain a motion that we recommend to the full council and that the city administration prepare the appropriate vote to pay these bills from prior years.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Councilor Nunn,
Yes.
seconded by Councilor Conway. Roll call?
Counselor Elliott.
Yes.
Counselor Conway.
Yes.
Counselor Noon.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you. And thank you to the school committee as well. I know that they did meet on this. They have moved this forward, and it was a little bit challenging getting both committees at the same time. But I think they're well represented, and Ms. Turner did forward information to us ahead of time. Moving forward on the next agenda item, could we get an update regarding the city auditor search? I know the full council did discuss this, and there was a recommendation from the full body to hire the Collins Center to do an employee search for, correct me if I'm wrong, for the auditor, transportation engineer, and assessor.
That's correct.
Great. So can we get an update on all three, or I'd like all three, but we'll take the auditor.
I'm prepared to give you an update on the city auditor right now.
Yeah.
I'm happy to discuss in less detail the other two searches, which, in the order of priority, the city auditor was first on the list. And so, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, back in late in May, the city council voted to engage a recruiter to assist with hiring the process. We brought on the Collins Center at UMass Boston to aid in the search. They work with these types of searches quite frequently and have notable experience. So in doing so, we created a job profile for the position, and the UMass Boston Collins Center assisted with recruiting and reached into their professional networks, not just the places where they were advertised previously, but reached out to individuals directly, as well as professional organizations. Now, the results of that were not terribly great. There was applicants, but this is a very difficult position to fill. I don't think that is a surprise to the council. It is the same experience that a lot of other municipalities are facing in their own either city auditors or town accountant searches, that the municipal finance field is not bountiful in terms of people looking for other jobs, either because they're happy where they are or for personal reasons. However, the search did produce two viable candidates that were selected by the screening committee, which consisted of myself, Allison Chambers, the deputy CFO, Mary Callery, the HR director, and we consulted along the way with the interim city auditor, Cheryl Wright. We did interviews with the two candidates, and it was the unanimous recommendation of the screening committee to bring forward Kelly Oakes, which is an item on the agenda this evening for the city council. Ms. Oakes is the current city treasurer. She has been with us for a little over 2 years. Her resume is included in the city council package this evening, and it is our recommendation for appointment by the city council this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that the finance subcommittee may have, or hold my recommendation and further explanation for the full city council this evening.
I'm good with it. Thank you for the explanation. Thank you for the update. As you mentioned, there's something on the council agenda, so there's no recommendation necessary coming out of this city council. I think that's good news. The only question I would have would be, what's the next step after, if she will be appointed to the auditor?
That's a very good question, and we have presented a plan. Obviously, the city council has retained the appointing authority for the city auditor, so it is pending a vote by the city council. However, the recommendation is to appoint Ms. Allison Chambers, the deputy CFO, as the acting treasurer. The vacancy in the treasurer's office needs to be filled by law in order for the city to maintain payroll and AP warrants, as well as there needs to be a name on all of the bank accounts. So in order to fill that position in the interim, the city manager has put forward a recommendation to appoint Allison Chambers. And the Collins Center has agreed, because they in their search, they found us a current employee who certainly is the best candidate for the job and has our full recommendation, but they have agreed to do the search for the city treasurer for us for free. And so they will assist the city with finding a permanent replacement for Ms. Oakes at no cost.
It's good news, too. Let me also recognize Council Drinkwater had joined us a while ago as well. Questions from members of the subcommittee? Council Noon, Council Conway? All set. Question from Councilor Marcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the city chief financial officer, trailing back away a bit to the paying prior bills in the school department. Are we saying the prior year or prior years? What are we saying here?
It is from the prior year, meaning FY 2021.
Oh, just 1 year?
Correct.
Because I misunderstood and I thought you said years, and I was thinking years, but that's good, that's good.
My apologies.
Thank you, that's all right.
Councilor Gianquardo is all set. No further business. We made it in time for the next city council meeting. If there's no further business
Motion to
before us,
adjourn.
actually, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. This is unrelated to any of the agenda items, but it's more of a, we've had updates on the status of city council budget or FY '22 budget. There's been some concern and discussion about resource officers, and a question was posed to me, so I'm just asking this as informational. There'll be no action taken on it. School resource officers. The city pays for 8 of them. Is that correct? Is that the number that was in the budget? I just want to know how many are in the budget, and is that a net school spending maintenance of effort?
So the school resource officers are uniformed officers paid for by the police budget, which is an appropriation by the city council. And the total amount for the school resource officers is credited towards the net school spending calculation. So the cost for those salaries for officers that are embedded in the schools counts towards the annual requirement for the city to meet the education requirements under Chapter 70. It's approximately $382,000. As to the number of officers, I believe there has been a shift in the last few years, and it'd probably be better if we could get you a report on that to give you the detailed numbers.
Okay. I think that would be helpful. Concern has been raised on the status of them, whether they're deployed, but the city does pay for them. So if you can get the council more information, I'm sure there'll be more discussion on this issue. But I do think it's important to bring it up. The city does pay for them to the tune of $382,000, and the status of them. Deployment is managed by the chief of police. Is that safe to assume? Oh, you're the chair of public safety.
That's correct.
Oh, Sakari is, I'm sorry. Okay, so that's a discussion. It's not on the agenda. You provided information, and I don't want to meander from the agenda. No further discussion, no further business. Entertain a motion to adjourn by Council Conway, seconded by
Second.
Council Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the opposed, that motion carries. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you, everybody.